Have you ever had a conversation with someone who claims that they used to be a Christian, they used to believe in Jesus, and now they moved on to another religion, whether it's Buddhism, Hinduism, neo-paganism, whatever. And the reason they give for why they moved on from Christianity is because they tried it, they tried that Jesus thing, and it just didn't work. They tried to believe what the Bible said and do what the Bible said, and it just didn't work for them, and so now they're moving on. They tried that, it doesn't work. Have you ever had that conversation with someone? I have had a few of those conversations in my life, and in almost all of them, and if not all of them, every time I would ask this person, well, what did you believe about Christianity? Or what did you believe about what the Bible said? I mean, if it's not every time, it's almost every time. The answer I got was something that left me saying, well, wait, that's not what the Bible teaches. That's not what Christianity is. You didn't, if you want to use the phrase try, you didn't try Christianity. You, quote unquote, tried some distorted version of Christianity. Maybe you were in a really bad church, or maybe you just rejected everything you heard if it was right, and you tried something else. But you didn't, quote unquote, try true Christianity. You didn't understand what the Bible said, and you didn't understand the gospel message. So that's not a reason for you to reject Christianity because you think you tried it and it didn't work. I think most Christians can recognize the folly, basically, of that argument against Christianity. Well, I tried it and it didn't work. And yet, what I want to make is application to the civil or political realm. That's what I keep hearing from some who are saying, well, you know what? We tried to follow the Bible in society. We tried to have a society based on the Bible and based on, and usually this is framed in terms of wanting smaller government. So the theonomic position by nature, compared to what we have now, would certainly be a much smaller infrastructure. You wouldn't have forced taxation. You wouldn't have departments of health and education and all these things. And so that leads some people to say that theonomy is libertarianism, which is a complete falsehood. That is not true. But for some people, they equate the two because there's some overlap, but there's overlap between almost every position. So it's not fair to say that the biblical theonomy is the same as libertarianism. But just for example, I'm going to try to do a podcast soon on tariffs. And I'm going to try to bring in one of my old economics professors from down in Delaware, because that's an example where people say, look, we tried free trade. It doesn't work, obviously. And so now we got to do these tariffs. Well, again, I'm sitting there saying, well, we haven't really had, if you want to use the term free trade, we haven't had that. We haven't had a society where the government is not involved, first of all, in all our own businesses and the amount of regulations and taxation and fines and fees and requirements. We have not had a biblical society when it comes to commerce. And so for people to say, well, you guys who are opposed to tariffs or this or that on biblical grounds, hey, we tried that, it doesn't work, and so we're moving on to this, and this is going to work. And you can make your arguments for tariffs, but please don't make the case that, hey, we tried the biblical view and it didn't work, so we're going to try something else. That is very fallacious. And anyone who's studied the history of government regulation in this nation for just the past 50 years, and you could go further, would come to the conclusion that we have not had a society that has been moving in the direction of biblical law in terms of many things, including trade, if you will. So, but even in other areas where people say, well, you know what, the theonomic position, we had that in the past, but it didn't work. So now we got to move on to, we need a Christian dictator who's going to, make all these laws and all these things. And we tried we have not, as a nation, we have not tried the biblical position. I mean, the closest we were to it was in the beginning, but we got away from that, especially with the Constitution. And people now are still, the post-Constitution consensus is very much alive and well in America. And the assumption being, we got to keep making laws and all this stuff. But let's let it go with these arguments, please, from my brothers in Christ out there arguing for whether it's Christian nationalism or something else. Make your argument, but please don't make the argument that, hey, we tried what you guys are saying. We tried a free market, which we haven't. We have not tried that. We tried biblical law, in the modern era. We have not. And it doesn't work. And so now we're just gonna use all these huge government departments, and we're gonna use all these man-made methods, and we're gonna use man-made law, but we're gonna use it for good. I mean, that is actually what we've been trying for the past 50, 100 years. I mean, if you want to go back to the New Deal and then World War II, I mean, you had the conservative movement then, and they're not saying much different than what they're saying now. I mean, if you've read George Nash's book on the conservative intellectual movement in America, I mean, the arguments that these guys, Russell Kirk and others, were making back, I don't know, 50s, 60s, they sound very similar to the arguments being made today. That is, they're arguing for a return to the roots. They're arguing for some sort of religious foundation, but they are not arguing. They're explicitly distancing themselves from anything related to biblical law or biblical justice. But their idea is that if we can go back to Aristotle, and this is not new to today. I mean, this is what the conservative thinkers were doing 60 years ago. We got to get back to we got to get back to the principles of Plato and Aristotle, and we need to be rooted. I mean, you go to Edmund Burke, Russell Kirk, any of these guys, and they were trying to use the system of man-made law, follow the Constitution. Let's use these power structures, and let's defeat liberalism. Let's defeat what their version of clown world would have been. And I submit that we actually have tried what many are trying now, and that is, conservatism with a veneer of Christianity. We've definitely tried that. There's no doubt about that. And I submit that's got us here. Now, that's not my argument against this, that we tried and it didn't work, but I mean, that is telling. But for people to say, we've tried free trade and it doesn't work. We've tried to allow businesses to have the freedom to make their choices and it didn't work. We don't do that. I mean, just look at the amount of businesses and regulations and small businesses that have been run out because of the man-made law and the big corporations that get the lobbyists in there that can then run the small businesses out of business because of man-made law. We have not had, if you want to use the term free trade, I mean, we haven't had a biblical system, and especially in other areas as well. And so that's not an argument against the position being put forth by men at Future of Christendom and other theonomists who are arguing for the biblical platform of justice, which does not include something that is basically the essential component of the American system, the legislative branch, forced taxation, and man's call to make more and more laws. So we have not tried that in America. We've gotten away from it a long, long time ago. So make your case for big government. Make your case for the goodness in principle of universal health care, as Stephen Wolfe did. Make your case for a little bit of socialism, as Doug Wilson does. But don't make your case on the basis that we've tried the biblical position and it just doesn't work, because we haven't done that. And frankly, we're going back to the same old playbook. And maybe it's because, I guess that's the way it works. I mean, the conservative movement, it ebbs and flows, but a lot of these guys seem to be, I guess they're my age. They're generally younger. I guess I'm still considered young. And I think they're just getting into this stuff. And it seems to them this is, they would say, well, no, we're just going back to how it was. We're going back to our roots, what our fathers believed. But if that's the case, then you can't make the claim that, we tried something else. You can't claim that we tried the biblical position and it didn't work. You can claim that, hey, in the past, we kind of had these conservative values and I'd just like to ask when. And by what standard do you judge them? I mean, things started to go downhill after the Constitution. Then you get the war between the states, and then things get way out of control. But just going back to even the beginning of the modern conservative movement after the New Deal, I mean, that they were not able to defeat liberalism. What do you have now? You have bigger government, more secularism, more a lack of rootedness in the culture. So conservatism wasn't able to do that. And I submit that biblical law actually provides the best avenue, the best environment, perhaps. It's a byproduct of biblical law and justice. The best environment for traditions and culture to thrive is when you have biblical law implemented. And I'm just concerned that people want to preserve those good things, but they're doing it without biblical law. And they're making the claim, maybe it's a bit of a subtle claim, but I've definitely heard it with this idea of tariffs and other things. They're making the claim that, we tried your way and it didn't work. And they're equating biblical law and theonomy with this liberalism of the 20th century that says, well, you just got to have your own personal beliefs and everybody has to have complete individualism. And again, that's not the biblical position. Sure, that's a reality, but you can't say we tried the biblical position. You can say, people have been influenced by liberalism and that doesn't work. Okay, agreed. But that doesn't mean that what you're proposing is the solution. It certainly doesn't mean it by default. So all I'm saying is, don't make the case that we've tried the biblical position on trade, or the biblical position on money, or the biblical position on justice, and we tried it and it didn't work. Because that's just like those people you talk to that say, well, I'm no longer a Christian because I tried it and it didn't work. And frankly, that's what many of these people are sounding like when they say, theonomy and biblical justice and free trade or whatever, those sound good in theory, but we tried them and they don't work, so we just have to use force. And there's a ton of leeway. We can use whatever force we want. We can punish people if they don't pay the government what the government wants, and that's going to work now. I submit that it won't. And let's not say we've tried something when we haven't. All right, have a great day.